Here came from Athens, Georgia this morning. Raise your hand, did anyone go to UGA or UGA Law School? Okay, a few of you. Bo Rutledge, the dean over there, is on our board, so he wanted me to ask and give a special shout out to the UGA Law grads. If you're not a UGA Law grad, do better. No, I'm just kidding. Your kids have an opportunity still, and you can still make better choices for where your investments go in the future. So you guys, raise your hand if you're attorneys. Okay, amazing. We have 3 on the board. I love them and hate them all at the same time. And I appreciate them so very much. You guys are attorneys, and I like to say that I am an agent. And I am an agent for the awkward. So what I'm going to get you to do right now is I want everyone to stand up. Raise your hand if you got some drop joy this morning. Okay, so you've been warmed up already. What I want you to do is I want you to turn to someone next to you, and for those of you in the middle of a row, you're going to have to find another human being. And I want you to look at them, and then I want you to give them a giant hug. You guys were much better than the accountants. So great job on that. Did you know that you need 17 hugs a day? 17 hugs a day just to survive. So show of hands for those that have children. Okay, don't forget to hug your children. You think one hug is enough. If my 15-year-old, one hug is enough sometimes, and it's super awkward, and I'm like, I'm an agent for the awkward, I'm going to give you 17 more. Don't forget to hug your children. Don't forget to hug your children, and to hug your spouse, too. It's super important. Human touch is super important. And what we're doing at ESP and through Job of Joy is we're not just hugging. But I'm going to talk a little bit today about what that hug actually does. What it does to your mind, thus what it does to your heart, thus what it does to your actions in the future. A couple things, I'm going to share a little bit about me, but I'm also really going to share more about ESP, which I'm really excited about. And I like interaction. So like if you have a question or you have a comment, there's going to be some times that I ask things of you all, and I told Jen that I fit a 4-hour training into 50 minutes. So if you seem like I'm like sweating up here and trying to talk really quickly, it's only because number one, you're attorneys, and I wanted to get as much information to you as possible. But number two, I just love Chick-fil-A, and I just want to tell you all the things and share all the things. And truly, I don't think you're going to leave here and really remember a whole lot about what I said. I do think you might remember how you felt throughout this presentation, and that is my goal, and I hope that something resonates with you, and if it does, I did give you a little bit of a note card there that you can follow along, and I'm hoping that you leave here with 3 key takeaways today. I recently had, and I have a note card here, and you'll know why. I had an experience recently. I'm on the board of a medium-sized bank, okay? And it's just something I do a little bit on the side. I learned so much being there, and I think they largely have me there because they wanted a millennial on the board. I'm on the top end of that. I can talk about technology innovation and maybe some marketing, and then also some give back opportunities and the importance of community. But we're sitting there in this boardroom, looks similar to that, and we were doing a capital planning exercise. And we were talking about ensuring capital adequacy and how we use our ERM software to manage our risk health through our PT score, and how all these scenarios that we discussed created a strategic forecast on our asset growth rate to lower our ROA and help our dividend increase. And all of this led into our 5-year condensed parent cash flow and our EFSL offering effects, and all of that had an impact on our 2025 subordinated debt reverting a upward floating rate. And so I'm a lifelong learner, and I'm just taking some notes, like all the notes, and I'm sitting around with these board members who are 20 and 30 years older than I am, and 20 and 30 years old wiser than I am, and I sat there, and there have been times I've sat there and really, contributed, and this was not one of those days. And so I sat there and I looked around at these people talking about subordinated debt and where we needed to be in 2025, and man, what a time to be on a bank board, right? And I thought, I don't belong. I don't belong. I have 2 degrees, but none of them fit this table. My experience professionally, while I have been doing this for 19 years, I'm sitting at this table and it felt foreign to me. And I thought, I absolutely do not belong. And it reminded me of a time I flashed back to when I was 19 years old. And what happened when I was 19 years old is I was interrupted, my life was interrupted. I went from the Atlanta, Georgia to Athens, Georgia, like, raise your hand. Atlanta to Athens, to UGA. And volunteering was very much a way of life for my family in Atlanta. My parents served on boards, and again, show of hands for those of you that are parents. Okay. What you do today is what your children will one day display. And for me, when I went to Athens, Georgia, I knew I had to find a place to volunteer because that's just what we did. So if you're serving on boards and extra committees here at Chick-fil-A, your children are noticing that, and you may not be present with them, but they're paying attention to where you're serving and who you're giving to, and the church that you've dug into, or the community that you are supporting. And so I actually was introduced to ESP by my ex-boyfriend's sister. It was truly the only good contribution that he made to our relationship, and I'm very thankful to this day that he did. He likes to remind me, he has 3 children now, I have 3 children now, he likes to remind me that he introduced me to ESP, and I walked in and fell in love with a community where everyone belonged. And I was captivated by this place. We served 40 individuals of all abilities. I started volunteering shortly after that, got to know the founder, Martha Wiley, who started it in 1986 in Watkinsville, right outside of Athens, Georgia. And only a year later, after serving as summer camp leadership, she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And she sat us down, 30 college students, and she looked us in the eyes and she said, ESP, you and me, this is yours for you all to take over. And so as a 19-year-old, I was asked to take over as the executive director of a nonprofit organization. And shortly after that, as I'm working on my sophomore year of college at UGA, I walked into a chamber dinner full of 2,000 of the best and brightest business people in our community. And here I was, a 19-year-old girl with my long blonde hair and my church shoes and my little floral dress, and there were pencil skirts and high heels and ties and older gentlemen with white hair, and I walked in and I looked at this chamber room and I thought, I do not belong here. do not belong. Let me ask you, when is the last time you felt that? You felt like you didn't belong. You know, some people in life, and the people that I often have the benefit of being around, feel that more often than not. Some of us feel that more often than others. We walk into parties or churches or grocery stores or dinner parties and networking events, or maybe here in a room at a table where we feel like we don't belong. I believe at our core, we all want to belong, and we all want other people to belong. Raise your hand if you don't want your friend to belong. No, we all want others to belong. We all want others to belong. So why is this so challenging? If we all want others to belong, if we all want to belong, why are we in a society right now that is more polarizing than it ever has been before? I believe sometimes we go about it the wrong way, and I'm going to share a little bit more about why and how I think that we can do that, particularly as it relates to people of all abilities. This is me and Ryan, one of my favorites at ESP, and me as a 19-year-old trying to figure out what in the world to do with this struggling nonprofit. This is me now with my family and some recent photos. You know, raise your hand if you, as a parent, you know, you were, okay, I was Laura, right? And now I go to certain places and I'm Owen's mom. Yeah, anybody? And like, I'm okay with that. Give me the name badge. Like, I'd love to wear a name badge that says that I'm Owen's mom or Finley's mom or Tate's mom. And really what I'm going to share with you a lot about today and the people that we're going to celebrate today, it's very similar. I get to stand up here, and yes, my title says CEO, but I get to stand up here and kind of be ESP's mom. I'm just like a representation, an extra appendage of, it's not the Laura show, it's the ESP show, and I'm just, you know, I show up and it's like, oh, ESP, and I'm like, yeah, oh, Java Joy, and I'm like, yeah, and so it's just an incredible honor, and truthfully, you know, it's a big opportunity and responsibility to represent the people that we serve, and really during this time, Chick-fil-A is on the forefront of talking about DE&I as it relates to people of all abilities. You know, that's been the piece that's been left out in the conversation, and it's starting to be a part of the conversation, but I can share with you because I've been in numerous companies. Normally, I'm the first person talking about it within the company. And look, you've got a committee already set up. I heard that Ben was here, and you guys got to hear from Ben if you were here. And gosh, you know, how lucky are you that you guys are on the forefront of this conversation. A quick little thing about ESP, who we are. We exist to create transformative experiences for people with disabilities and their families, and we believe that that's important to serve the person and to serve the family, but we believe those people and our programs are not just changing their lives, they're changing an entire community for the better, and I'm going to share a little bit more on how we do that. These are our three programs, the three ways in which we do our mission every day. We have an after school program and summer camps, wraparound family support. We're taking a bunch of families to the beach. You ever thought about if you have an individual in a wheelchair, how challenging it might be to just go to the beach? And so we're going to take 50 families to the beach, and we're not just taking them to the beach. We've rented a bunch of beach wheelchairs, and every family has a buddy so that they can help push and get in the water, and families can go on a walk by themselves while we help provide care for their child. Java Joy, you guys fueled up? You good? Okay. Did you know that 87% of adults with disabilities who want and can work are unemployed? 87%. Challenging, right? We're working. Maybe we'll get a little bit closer to 86% with Java Joy one day. And then Hooray is our summer camp program, and our future property, we've got about 90 acres in Jackson County that we're working to eventually build an overnight camp in. This is who we serve and the different abilities that we serve, different ages and stages of life. And we are currently in 3 different cities. We are in Athens, we are in Atlanta. We just recently shared that we're spreading our wings into the Marietta area for some programs. And then we are in Rome, Georgia. This is the top pictures, what it looked like when I first walked in as a 19-year-old. Since then, we have grown, built a new building in 2016, and then just recently opened up our full campus with a universally designed playground where every child has access to every part of that playground, and a Miracle League field where we've had kids who've never played an organized sport. Dads who have never coached their kids before have the opportunity to play on our Miracle League field. The beautiful thing is that what we know about research is that if kids without disabilities have no barrier to play with kids with disabilities, like on that playground, not only will they play with them on that playground in that moment, but statistically, research shows that they will continue to include them throughout the trajectory of their life. And that is because a positive neural cycle has formed. And we're going to talk about neural cycles in just a second. Java Joy came from humble beginnings. It came from 5 business owners who approached me after we opened up our new building, who said, Laura, I love to volunteer for ESP. I love to bring my employees to ESP. It's the right thing to do, but we have a confession. All of them said this in their own little way. They said, you know, it's the right thing to do. We love volunteering for ESP, but my employees are coming back to the office, and they're more joyful, and thus they're more productive, and thus my bottom line is better. I'm selling more cars. My bottom line looks better, and I was like, good, it should. But not everybody can come to us. What if we went to other people? What if we could use it to help solve a problem that 87% of adults with disabilities are unemployed? And so we started with a janitor cart and thought, you know what, we're just going to go around town to a few things here and there, and it'll be really fun. We're going to rig up this janitor cart, take the show on the road. The very first event we went to was a bank. I had about 50 business owners lined up to ask me how they could book Java Joy. They wanted a cultural experience that helped to begin a conversation about DE&I and B. It was a great opportunity for their employees to be both thanked, celebrated, and also something new. We went to a large manufacturing plant after that, and I thought, okay, this is really going to be a test to see, does Java Joy translate? Does it work, right? Like, does everybody love Chick-fil-A? Mostly so, right? You know, I'm from Athens, and there's Zaxby's in Athens, and while Chick-fil-A may be a competitor to the Zaxby's, I don't think Zaxby's is much of a competitor to Chick-fil-A. You know what I'm saying? We're from Athens, Georgia, and we love our Chick-fil-A twice a week. We love our Chick-fil-A. And so, would Java Joy translate? Could it work in a chamber or a bank? Could it work in a large manufacturing plant with a totally different demographic? Would it work? So we loaded up, we got there at 5 a.m. for the 5:30 shift. Big burly guys rolling up in there, ready to start their shift at the manufacturing plant, and I watched, and I stood back. That's Hannah and Suzanne, who started it. And I'm just taking my notes from behind to see if it would translate. So at first, these individuals walk by and they kind of look at the cart, and they go to their first shift. The shift ends 90 minutes later, they have their first break, and what draws them to the coffee? The smell of Jittery Joe's. I heard somebody talking about Jittery Joe's. You went to Georgia, you just know that smell, Jittery Joe's. So they wanted that coffee, so they come up to the cart. I'm like, this is going to be interesting. And, you know, we give the coffee, and sometimes we have a question of the day. The interaction starts. People begin to notice, okay, these are people with different abilities. And then comes the hug. And as I mentioned, agent for awkward here, the lean in, do you want a hug? And as I watch these big, burly, stiff men lean in for a hug, I watched as their bodies just melted and loosened. And then the smile came. And then the interaction came. And then they came back 90 minutes later for another break, and then 90 minutes later for another break. And then they took an employee survey that day, and some of these people had worked for their company for over 30 years. They said it was their favorite day at the office that they've ever had. The beauty of Java Joy is that we are changing the perspectives of people with and without different abilities. And so I'm going to share a little bit more. This is our look that you got to experience this morning. When we first started Java Joy, we started at the roaster, and the Joyristas got to pick out our blend. The blend that you had this morning, there's a story behind it, and I'm going to share it with you via video if the technology works for me. When we first started Java Joy, we needed the perfect coffee blend. So we took our Joyristas, board members, and a few staff to taste test and decide. Coffee tastes different all around the world. Each has its own group of diverse notes and bodies with different acidities, aromas, and tones. For example, a cup of coffee in Hawaii will taste very different from a cup of coffee in Brazil. At the roaster, we had a choice between 3 different blends: the Nicaraguan, the Colombian, and the Guatemalan. Each blend with diverse groups of beautiful things about them. We set up the taste test, 4 numbered cups on the table laid in front of each brew. Each person got 1 singular coffee bean to place into their cup as their vote. Much to our surprise, 100% of the Joyristas voted for the same cup of coffee, number 4. And guess what number 4 brew was? A blend of all 3. A typical house coffee is a blend of several different coffees from different places. And at ESP, we believe that in life and within business, diversity is a mix of blends. What makes a beautiful company, group, and family is a mix of tones and notes and origins that together create a perfect blend and combination. The truth is, your company wants to continue to diversify its blend. Your company has chosen to partner with JoyWorks and continue facilitating conversations and interactions about diversity. But your company's blend is dependent on yours. You are responsible for your blend, which carries over to the large blend of your business, which can affect your client base, your customers, and the overall community.
All right, so that's the story of how we found our Java Joy blend. Pretty cool, huh? That out of all of those 3 different, it was the blend of all 3 that was chosen by our Joyristas, and we really do believe that. We see it in action every single day at ESP, that it's a mix of notes and tones in a business that truly makes the perfect blend. So what we're talking about a little bit today is DE&I, and if you haven't noticed, the B is the newer addition to the family. And I loved, somebody shared me the definition that Chick-fil-A uses of DE&I, which includes belonging, and D, valuing differences. E, equal, the same, access, and I, a community of belonging. Sometimes I like to describe it as this: diversity is just a fact. It's statistics on a piece of paper. It's like how well you're doing, right? Equity is a choice. It's a choice that a company has. It's a choice that we all have. Inclusion is an action. It's something that you do. But belonging is the result, which is a feeling. If you have done DEI correctly, B happens. It's a feeling. It's when I walked in that chamber building and I looked around, it was the feeling that I felt. And there have been many situations where I feel like I belong, but not when I didn't. It was that boardroom where I sat there and that topic, I was like, it was the feeling that I felt that I don't belong. And, I think that we try to attack this in a bunch of different ways. And what I love about Java Joy is and ESP is we love to kind of flip concepts on their head and really ask about why. Like, why are we talking about DEIB? Why does it matter for you to think about belonging? And I ultimately think it matters because we all want to belong and we all want others to belong. We just don't know how. We don't know how sometimes. And I think sometimes we use social science, other times we use behavioral science and organizational science, but I'm going to talk a little bit today about neuroscience. And I love talking about neurodiversity, so neuroscience kind of makes sense and how the brain actually works. So I'm going to show you one other video, a little bit about the neuroscience behind DEIB.
Neurodiversity, or ND, refers to the variations in the human brain and cognition, such as sociability, learning attention, mood, and other mental functions. Neurodiversity is a viewpoint that the brain differences in our heads are normal rather than deficits. Neurodivergent people experience, interact with, and interpret the world in unique ways. My last 20 years at ESP has taught me that people with disabilities do not often feel like they belong in the workplace and in public, just like I felt at the chamber dinner. At ESP, our mission has been to create communities of belonging for all. JoyWorks focuses on diversity as it relates to disability, or as we like to say, diversity as it relates to ability. My hope for you in the next few minutes is to educate you and provide a perspective about how diversity and disability can be a conversation in the workplace and beyond. You may not have had many experiences with people who have disabilities. It's not that you outright think anything negative, you just haven't had the neural pathways to tell you how to feel. Some people are reluctant to come to the Job Joy cart because they think, I don't know how to talk to this individual. If someone's in a wheelchair, should I bend down to hug them? What do I do? How do I act around someone with autism? What if I do the wrong thing? And what if I say something offensive? That initial feeling of awkwardness is natural, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. Fear is the most significant barrier when trying new things or interacting with people who are different from us. The fear of failing, the fear of saying the wrong thing. What's fascinating about my brain and your brain is that once we decide to engage, which is what Java Joy initiates, it can create a positive neural pathway. We have watched people interact with our Joyristas, have a meaningful connection, and suddenly realize they don't have to be an expert in interacting. The fear diminishes and a positive neural connection forms. Your company has chosen to hire people with disabilities through Java Joy. Our hope is to form more positive neural connections so that we can advance inclusion and belonging by changing our brains, thus our responses, in and outside of the office, changing communities for the better.
So we can talk about it and we can put together policies and procedures all day long. But what's the truth about law? Human nature is oftentimes to break it. You guys wouldn't have jobs if that wasn't true, am I right? So we can put policies and procedures together having to do with D, E, I, and B. But the truth is, until we change the neural pathways in our brain, until we start leaning into the awkwardness of having conversations with people who are different than us, friendships that are different than us, having people at the table that are different than us, then the truth is our personal blend and our company's personal blends will never change. And that is the beauty of neuroscience. So I'm going to talk for a minute about unconscious bias, which is not like a super fun thing, so we're going to do an activity to talk about it really quick. So grab your phone, and what I want you to do is I want you to go to your camera. And what I want you to do is I want you to go to your camera, and then there's this little thing at the bottom that's like the little turnaround thing. And I want you to turn it around, which is called a what? A selfie. And what I want you to do is give your camera the most beautiful smile, and I want you to take a selfie. And then, after you take a selfie, what I want you to do is go to that photo, and I want you to click edit. And then I want you to choose the best filter that makes you look the most wonderful. Just choose it. I'm going with vivid. There's dramatic. I'm feeling vivid cool today. So bonus if you want to post that beautiful picture of yourself and tag ESP. But what I want you to remember when you look at that picture later on, don't delete it. When you're scrolling through or your kids are scrolling through, is what I want you to remember is that we go through life with filters. We go through life with filters and we are unconscious to those filters. Have you ever been scrolling Instagram or Facebook and you're like, God, her skin looks so good. My skin does not. Or his hair looks really good. I don't know how he has that much hair at the front of his forehead. And what's happening there is that oftentimes those pictures are filtered, right? And we are unconscious to the fact that those are filtered. Our brain doesn't think like, oh, her eyelashes are that long because she has an eyelash filter on. We just go, wow, she looks really pretty. Similarly, we are going through life with filters on our brain. And those filters are called unconscious biases. And until we bring those unconscious biases up to our consciousness, we're doing exactly what we're doing when we're scrolling Instagram and Facebook and being unconscious of the filters that happen. So what are unconscious biases? Well, by definition, a prejudice, unsupported judgment, or attitude in favor of, or against one thing, person, or group as compared to another in a way that's usually considered unfair. That is the definition of an unconscious bias. So we all have these things, these prejudices, these judgments towards certain people, and I'm going to share one of my stories and be vulnerable with you in just a second. But we all have them, and if you think you don't, and you are the best DEIB person out there, I am telling you, you do. You have unconscious biases that you are not aware of. And because of that, your posture towards people, towards your coworkers, towards your family members is different because those are unconscious. And our posture changes our power. Our perspective changes our posture, and our posture changes our power to connect with others. So these are all of the different lists of all of the different unconscious biases, and I am not going to go through them, but this is participatory. I am going to ask you to look at this list. We have biases against people with different races and ethnicities, age, people's names. Have you ever thought about it? Somebody's name is different, and maybe you have a bias because of an ex-boyfriend or an ex-girlfriend, or what that name might mean to you or sound like. Gender, location, affiliations, language, occupation, ability or disability, beauty, weight, height, attire, behavior, interest, family, material possessions, hobbies, habits, communication. We did this within our organization, and the person who led us through the process 4 years ago made me, as the CEO, stand up, and we took time and reflection. And typically when I do this training, we do this exercise because it is so powerful. And if you have a team of people, it would be very powerful to go through this exercise. And what we did was we took 10 minutes and we all wrote down, and it takes time. And then I thought of many later on, and we wrote down our biases. And then the facilitator said, okay, CEO, stand up, and I want you to share your biases with your team. Vulnerability breeds trust. And I'll tell you, it was one of the most humbling, but also the most encouraging and team-building moments within our crew. And one of those biases that I stood up and shared, I'm so thankful I did, because ESP would not be where it is without me recognizing that this was an unconscious bias that all of a sudden went up to a conscious bias. And what happens when it's a conscious bias and you shift your perspective? It changes your posture, and your posture changes your power to connect with people. And so what happened was my bias one of my biases that I shared was that I had a bias against upper level, middle-aged white men. Bizarre, right? Why? Because as a 19, 20, 21, 22-year-old female girl in the business world, I had some very negative interactions with some middle-aged white men. It just so happened that I had some bad interactions. And it was more about what I looked like rather than what I thought. And so those early interactions, it wasn't fair that any other middle-aged white men all of a sudden got put in that category, right? That's not fair. But because of my experiences when I was 19, 20, and 21, I had a negative neural pathway back to neuroscience. And so whenever I saw a middle-aged white male, immediately those feelings felt the same way as I did when I was 19, 20, and 21 years old. And you know what happened when I went from unconscious to conscious? 3 months later, we had a job application out. LinkedIn popped up. Somebody applied for this job. This person made it to the top 3. White, upper-aged, middle-aged man. And because I knew that I had that bias, and I had already began to work on my neural pathway connection, I thought, okay, let's interview him. Let's do this. I was aware of it. Instead of being like, nah, he might not be a good fit. For what X, Y, and Z reason, not because he was a middle-aged white man. My brain would have compensated and said for other reasons. We brought him in. He was the right fit for the organization, and y'all, he has changed the game for ESP. And I'm so thankful that I took that unconscious bias and I brought it up to my consciousness, because ESP is a better place for it. I want to challenge you to take a picture of this if you want to, and I want you to think about what your unconscious biases are. And maybe you've done this exercise before. I guarantee you have some neural connections that all need to be rewired again. Think about this. Is it people's size, height, skin color, ability? And that's what we're going to focus on a little bit right now. I said this, but it is so true. Your perspective on people changes your posture, and how you may be kind, you may be considerate, but how do you truly interact with people that you have biases against? Your perspective shifts your posture, and your posture shifts your power to connect with people and ultimately create a place of belonging. So your challenge is, I want you to look at your biases this week. Write them down. Think about them. Talk about them with your husband or wife. It's a very interesting exercise, and it was a game changer for me. As it relates to people with disabilities, I'm curious, who in the room, when they were growing up in elementary school, who in the room, special ed classrooms were in the back of the school, or maybe in a trailer? Raise your hand. Okay. Who in the room, they were included in every other class? Okay, 1. Okay, so for those of you, and raise your hand, who in the room went to a school that didn't have people with disabilities? Okay, so many private schools, things like that. So if you didn't go to a school with people with disabilities, or you went to a school, like the vast majority of us, where people with disabilities were in the back of the school or in the trailer, what did that communicate to you? Like what, as a 5-year-old with your backpack and your lunchbox, and you're walking in the school, right? And person with a wheelchair goes this way, and like you go this way. No one said to you, there's a reason they should be separated, right? But in your little 5-year-old brain with your little backpack and your lunchbox, that neural connection formed for you. Culture and life taught that for you. Is it bad? Is it wrong? We're not here to debate any of that. I do believe in inclusion, right? But there are reasons and supports and accommodations that are important to provide support to people of all abilities. And I believe that we are moving in a better way towards inclusion in schools today. But think about that and think about what that taught you and what neural connection that built, that then into adulthood, it changed your perspective on interacting with people with disabilities. Like, how do you give a hug? Can you touch someone in a wheelchair? Like, what do you do? Do you bend down? Do you lean? By the way, I always get to their level, no matter what level that is. I always hug and I always interact up. Write that one down. Interact up. If you think that the person can't talk to them anyways. The person who's with them will likely help them talk to you, but instead of talking to the caregiver, interact up. Interact up the upper ability of what you think they have. You may be confused. You may say the wrong thing. Who cares? I can guarantee you, working with 1,000 families that we serve, a caregiver or a parent would much rather you engage and interact up than they would to pull back. Lean in. Awkward often leads to aha. But you have to lean into the awkward first. And oftentimes you realize in that interaction, you really don't have to know what to say. You really don't know have to be an expert in what to do. Just lean in and interact up. This is Adam. He's one of our joyristas at ESP. He has cerebral palsy. And one of the things about biases with people of all abilities is that we are all shaped by that little 5-year-old who walked into school. That's okay. It's okay to have those negative neural connections as long as you bring the unconscious to the conscious, right? We all have them. And so sometimes people don't see our friends like Adam because they just don't understand. They've never had experiences with people with disabilities. They just don't understand. And so they'd really kind of rather not just even think that they're there, right? It's just easier to kind of assume that people with disabilities don't exist. I don't think you're in that group. Other times we can just kind of overlook, like they're there, but like they don't go into Chick-fil-A. Well, we know that's not true, right? Or they're there, but they don't use the gym. So the other morning, I had to come to Atlanta and it was super early, and so I pulled into the gym. I'm a Crunch member, and I pull into the gym super early. I'm still trying to wake up, and I park, and I'm about to walk into Crunch, and this Camaro, this white Camaro, the guy with like slicked hair to the side, you know the guy. True story. And he, I'm about to walk in and he pulls into the handicap spot. And I'm like, oh no, he didn't. And so I'm thinking about all of the different things that I could potentially say to this human being. And so I'm like, okay, pull yourself together, you know, maybe he, and so I started going through all of the different scenarios. Laura, you have an unconscious bias here. He could have a disability that you can't see, so remember about the disabilities that you can't see. And I'm going through all the lists, but he can walk. He's about to run on the treadmill. And I was battling with it. And I really think that guy, after I closely evaluated him at the gym, I decided not to say anything, by the way. Sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't, but I prayed for him instead. I really think that guy thought, like, people with physical disabilities don't go to the gym. And so he kind of like overlooked it and thought it's early in the morning, no one with a disability is coming to the gym, I'm just gonna pull right here in that handicap spot. And I think that's a way that we oftentimes live life, is kind of overlook or choose to overlook. Or maybe our filter is very binary, meaning Adam has CP, so he can do this, but he cannot do this. Did you know that 25% of people with cerebral palsy, I think that's the recent number, can walk? They can walk. So just because they have cerebral palsy doesn't mean they can't walk, right? They may have a weighted gait. They may move differently. They may just have CP on one side of their body. But oftentimes we can say, oh, this person has autism, so they can't X, Y, and Z. Oftentimes we can think about people of all abilities. But this is Adam. He's first and foremost an ESP participant and Joyrista. He is our resident comedian. He loves to tell a joke. By the way, he also has cerebral palsy. That's a little about Adam. So we're gonna take a minute, and I have prizes. So if you're feeling like a little nervous to answer, and it is a smaller group this morning, what I wanna do is hear very quickly from you. We're gonna take the next 2 or 3 minutes, and these are some of the different abilities, as we would say it, before we get to our next practical thing, of the individuals that we serve at ESP and some of the Joyristas that we have. So I'm curious if anyone has a personal connection with someone with Down syndrome. Would you, several, would you mind sharing about your connection with a person with Down syndrome? This is Chris.
I was not expecting to talk, and I might cry. My son is 17 and was born with Down syndrome, and I'm not sure what you expect me to share, but
Tell us about his ability.
he is he's got a big personality, and he can walk, talk, lift weights, goes to the gym. When you said that, goes to the gym, and there are actually, we have seen several other people with disabilities at the gym. He goes to school. He is in a self-contained room, but he does have pullouts and does interact with the general ed population. He is in a chat group with typical kids, and they are always like sharing pictures of their muscles and things like that. So he is, and he is planning on going to college somewhere.
Awesome.
So
Let's give it up for Chris.
Raise your hand if you knew that Chris's son had Down syndrome. Awesome, awesome. All right, we're gonna take 2 more. What about cerebral palsy? Does anyone have a personal connection they're willing to share? All right, right over here.
So I actually think it's a connection we both have. One of my best friends from law school is Bill Neighbors. Yeah. Greatest guy, smartest guy in our law school class, and has a great law practice. I was texting him right now when you were doing this because I know you're all friends. He's talked about you before, but just a tremendous guy, super funny, so smart, and yeah, I mean, just can do anything. It really is amazing to watch him. So.
Thank you, Chad. Let's give it up for Chad.
You get a choice of a hat or a t-shirt from Miracle League, by the way. And yeah, Bill has cerebral palsy, and Bill and I went to high school together, and Chad, you and him went to law school together. So that's pretty cool. If you saw Bill, you would have never, if you had that unconscious bias, you would have never imagined that he is one of the funniest lawyers that you have ever met. And it would actually be really cool to bring Bill here sometime. All right, what about, do we have any TBI, traumatic brain injury? This one is normally a little different. Anyone with a connection with a TBI? Okay, how about, let's go to muscular dystrophy. Anyone a connection? All right, we got a friend over here.
I actually had a cousin who died from it. She lost all of the control of her muscles and eventually she passed from it, but we did have it in our family and it does run on my grandmother's side. So,
What's her name?
Annette.
Annette. Awesome. Can we give Zanetta?
So Zanetta mentioned something really important, which is muscular dystrophy. You know, it is degenerative. So intellectually, that person might be typical, and then over time, they might end up looking like someone with cerebral palsy. And so your interaction with them and interacting up is really important, right? Because intellectually, they might be hearing and understanding everything that you have said to them, and they want to interact with you, but they may not be able to interact in the way that they used to, which is, there's an incredible loss with that. Well, thank you guys so much for being willing to share. My challenge to you is to Ask a coworker or multiple coworkers, if you're a leader or you lead a team or you work with a team, ask them this question. What's your experience with people of different abilities? What's your experience with people with different abilities? I promise you, we've done this in a ton of companies. What pops up, and I love that you guys already knew and were aware, what pops up are those stories. Those stories that you never knew that muscular dystrophy runs, and the fear that can go with that, am I right? With that being in your family and how that could affect your family members. We have had companies and organizations ask this question, and secretaries, administrative assistants, people who have been in businesses for 10 or 15 years share that they had a child with different abilities, and the reason that they have to leave at 4:40 every single day is because they have to go pick up their child, and their boss never knew. You know why? They never wanted it to be a crutch for them. They never wanted it to be a reason they wouldn't get a promotion or a raise. They never wanted it to be an excuse for them. What an incredible opportunity we have as employees to lean into the people that we know, creating a sense of belonging. Can you imagine 10 or 15 years having a child with significant autism and the person sitting next to you at the desk never knew? Is that a place of belonging for that person? No. What they go through every day takes about $250,000 to raise a typical child. Who has more than three or more children? Okay, yeah. It takes $2.5 million to raise a child with special needs. $2.5 million to raise a child with special needs. It's important for us to know. I'm going to close here. What we do at ESP, the filter that we put on both ourselves and those that walk or roll in our doors is the ability filter. The ability filter. Well, what does that mean? It means that we focus on the top abilities of each person. And one of the reasons I think it's hard for us as we navigate life to navigate life through the ability filter is I believe we don't see ourselves through the ability filter. Like if I asked you right now and put you on the spot, could you tell me your top 3 abilities? Are you activating and operating and living an active life in your abilities? It's my challenge to you. If you don't know what your abilities are, there's a lot of great resources out there. We use the Enneagram. There's actually an ability finder that EOS uses. That's a really, really great one. There's DISC, there's Myers-Briggs, there's all the things. We use Enneagram because it's numbers and it's quick and it's easy and it works. But because of it, it helps us identify with both our weaknesses and our strengths, thus our abilities. You can't look at others and see their abilities, particularly others that are more difficult to work with, unless you can see the abilities within yourself. This is Nikki. Nikki was an original founding 5 member of Java Joy. He is also known and self-proclaimed the coffee fairy. And you'll notice that sometimes when I have talked about our friends at ESP, I have used these 3 things, and these are 3 practicals for you. First and foremost, people first language. People first language. People first language means if your grandmother had cancer, you would not call her cancerous grandmother. True? Am I right? That would be weird, okay? Similarly, we don't say Down syndrome boy. Why? Because the Down syndrome precedes the boy, meaning the only characteristic about them is the Down syndrome. So can you say the boy with Down syndrome? Yes, that's part of who he is. So that's like Academia 101 as it relates to talking about people with disabilities. The next layer of that is ability language. So you heard me say, what's the person's name? This is Nikki. He is the self-proclaimed coffee fairy. He's hilarious. He remembers your name. He gives the best hugs around. Also, he has autism. You see what I did there? Autism was a part of who Nikki is, and it's an important part of who Nikki is. We don't forget the autism, right? But we focus on the abilities. That is the ability filter, and there are so many abilities about him. And then we give them ability-focused opportunities. I'm gonna end with Nikki, but I want to terrible spelling. Wow. Evaluate yourself through the ability filter, and challenge your brain to think about people through the ability filter lens. That's your third and last challenge, is to evaluate yourself. My youngest son's name is Tate, so maybe it just came naturally, I don't know. Evaluate yourself through the ability filter and challenge your brain to think about people. Sometimes I like to remind people that, like, the most difficult person you work with, like, they have abilities too. And what if we looked at them every time we met them at the coffee machine, and we actually saw their top 3 abilities instead of the disabilities that they have or the challenges that they have, right? So challenge yourself to look. My homework for you, and I'm not going to follow up because I'm probably never going to see you again, but God knows. Your challenge is to think about your top 3 abilities and also to look at others through the ability filter. And I'll close here. A couple years ago, we were invited to go to San Francisco, California, to bring Java Joy to California. It was a guy who venture capitalist out of San Francisco, never had an interaction with someone with a disability, went to Ivy League schools, went to private schools, was in Atlanta, experienced Java Joy. It interrupted his life. He said it was one hug. He went on stage in front of 3,000 people, changed everything that he was gonna say to this large IT security software company. And he said it's about relationships and it's about that hug. And he got on an airplane and he called me. He said, I wanna bring Java Joy to San Francisco. This was December of 2019. Okay, just to kind of paint that picture. So what we did was we brought 4 Joyristas in all of their garb. With Delta's help, we were wearing our Delta stuff. We documented the whole thing. The stewardess announced them on the plane and said that they're going to spread joy to San Francisco. And I'll never forget one moment. We were in the Transamerica building. You guys know that building? Okay, large, lots of IT companies in there, and just in general tech companies, and we're at the very bottom floor. And so what we were doing is our Joyristas here were training Joyristas in San Francisco. And so we brought them over to train. And what was complicated about the Transamerica building was that people were coming and going super fast, but also there was all the floors and layers, right? I was like, this is gonna be interesting to see how this all goes. And so Nikki decides he wants to ride the elevator. And so he starts going floor to floor. And you know what culture would see when you interact with Nikki is a 6'3", large African-American male who loves to repeat over and over the movie The Color Purple. He has the entire thing memorized. It's fascinating. He never forgets a human's name. And it's kind of, at first, until you recognize, okay, Nikki has autism, that it's a little bit uncomfortable, and we're leaning into the awkward for the aha, and people are interacting, and he's saying, free hugs, y'all, like in the middle of San Francisco. And I'll never forget, he comes down and he's repeating to me something over and over and over again. And I'm like, what are you saying, buddy? And he was saying, Bob, 2 pumps of vanilla, Carol, and he was going through, and he went, and we found him a tray, and he went up and down the floors of the Transamerica building, never wrote down a single name, and never wrote down a single order. Nikki gave every single person, whether they wanted it or not, coffee from Java Joy, and gave them the experience and the service of Java Joy from their seat. It's so easy to look at the disability in people. But when you position them, when you take those unconscious biases and create new neural connections to make them conscious, when you position people because your perspectives have changed and your posture has changed, and you interact with someone in the grocery store or in the La Paria or in the wherever you are day to day, and you have new positive neural connections, it changes your posture, and your posture changes your power. And the power that Nikki had on that day was to use all of the abilities that he had and changed hundreds of people's day. We put him in a position where his abilities were able to shine. And that is my hope for you all today. I don't know what's stuck, and we have a short window to do questions and answers. If you need to leave, feel free. There's a lot more that I could have shared, but if you didn't hear anything else, I love being, and I'm a very, very proud mom of ESP. And we hope that you will take some time to engage with what we're doing. We hope to be similar to the Boys and Girls Club. We want to be all over the country providing a community like we do in Athens, Rome, and Atlanta. We'd love to have you a part of it. But I hope today you'll take some time to reflect, to be thoughtful, to think about how people on your team, in your office, in your home, how do they not just act or interact, but how do they feel? The feeling of belonging is the ultimate result that we are all looking for. Thank you guys so much for having me. It was a pleasure and a joy, and I'm very thankful for the opportunity.